It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. We're back. We're in it. We're ready to win it.
Back like we never left.
Back like we never left. A lot of stuff going on. You know, we took a week off because we had some various things going on. There's a lot going on with things, moving parts of my personal life. Nothing bad. All good.
I did not want to deny the dear Dubcast audience a single episode, but
and I said, screw these guys. I hate them all. No way.
Out of respect for the Dubcast veteran, the OG.
That's right.
I said, yeah, I'm good with taking a week off in the off season.
You're good with taking your break in the last week or first week of May.
Yeah.
That's when all the important stuff happens.
It ended up being a very fortuitous decision.
Yeah, because we would have published.
We always dread the Monday morning news dumps that happen after we record it. And sure enough, we got a pretty relevant one for Ohio State fan interests.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Michigan is expected to give Sherrone Moore a 2-game suspension, but like an a la carte suspension. So that's fun. We'll talk about that. Good. What? Anyway, we'll talk about it. We'll also talk a little about Jim Knowles throwing some smack out in the air. That'll be fun. Not like the drug, but you know, he's talking smack about Ohio State. Game day atmosphere with Ohio State Stadium, something I've complained about for so many years, and a few other things that we'll get into. So let's start with Jim Knowles. Actually, that's the more recent, more prescient news here. So Jim Knowles. There was a big article with Heather Dinich at ESPN, and it was like one of those, all right, let's take you inside the process. And really the process here of Jim Knowles leaving Ohio State for Penn State was Jim Knowles called Penn State and said, hey, I want to work with you guys. Can I be your defensive coordinator? And Penn State was like, yeah. And then that's basically it. So it's kind of framed as this very like insidery kind of article and all this kind of thing. But it's really just one guy trying to get more money.
Just remember, when people refer to Dinich as an insider, she was the one that sparked the conversation around let's not rule out a 3-loss SEC team.
That's right.
Playoff.
Yeah. So the article is pretty. It's much longer than it needs to be. I mean, that's really, I think, my biggest takeaway from this. It is interesting to me, at least on the level that Ohio State, both Ross Bjork and Ryan Day refused to comment for this, which to me is like absolutely the right move. Because first of all, Jim Knowles playing into the drama, which increasingly obvious that the dude really likes drama. Just best to stay out of it. So I know a lot of people were kind of talking about it and the haggling that took place and whatever, but ultimately the biggest thing I got from this article and this whole thing really with Jim Knowles is that the dude is kind of a drama queen. He felt that he should get way more money than the most money any college football coordinator has ever made ever, because that's what Ohio State offered him. And I think any way he was going to exit was going to be kind of sloppy. So I don't know. It doesn't really change my opinion of him because my opinion was never super high on him as like an individual, not as a coach per se, but just as somebody who was, going to come and go as a kind of a mercenary coach. I don't know. It just all feels kind of expected how it played out.
It changed my opinion on him pretty significantly,
really?
If I'm being honest.
Okay.
Yeah, because when we talked about him leaving initially, the big thing that I tried to play a little bit of devil's advocate in terms of if you feel like that you were disrespected in wake of the Oregon game and that you earned some level of not necessarily vindication, but you gradually proved yourself again over the course of the season on the way to the national championship, particularly in the playoff, you would understand why he would feel like that he got slighted a little bit and that, there was kind of an overreaction to one bad night on the road against the number one overall team in the country.
Right.
That he shouldn't have had to relinquish that much authority in the decision-making with the defense. So I tried to at least play a little bit of let's understand where he's coming from relative to this move that has just happened. What we did not have the context of prior to this article coming out, that this article kind of put some more light on. It's one thing to demand the amount of money that he did.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, he deserved it. I think he received that offer from Ohio State to be the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football. So that
Yeah, I mean,
it
according
shouldn't
to
have
his
been an issue within those confines.
yeah, according to his girlfriend slash fiance, it was like $2.75 or something million dollars. And
Yeah.
in a post, she kind of treated that like an insult. Like, I can't believe it. But that's the most any college football coordinator had ever made. And yeah, Penn State came in at 3.1, and that's fine. But like, to act like that was some kind of slap in the face to me is ridiculous. I
But
mean,
that ended up not really being where the greatest feeling of slight came in. Where it came in was
yeah,
he wanted to negotiate this allegedly prior to the national championship
right.
and felt disrespected that he did not get that vote of confidence prior to the game.
Yeah.
And that speaks to two different issues. It speaks to a great sense of self-centeredness on the part of Knowles, and it creates a distraction for the team. Probably not the team was I can't imagine the team was privy to the full context of this, but certainly the staff, at the very least, it is a distraction for Day while they're trying to manage this situation going into the national championship, when everybody should be focused on the common goal of winning a national title. And then once that job is done,
then you have those conversations.
Right. The fact that that wasn't plainly obvious to Knowles, I mean, this is like day one team dynamic stuff. That if you've all got a common goal and you're on the doorstep of achieving it, you know, you got to have a little. You can't put the horse before the car, or you can't. What is it? The cart before the horse.
Yeah, you can put the cart. Yeah, exactly. And no, I mean that's not the time to be doing that. It's funny to me that they try to make this whole parade thing, an issue where Jim Knowles wasn't at the celebration in the shoe and whatnot. That was on January.
He was kind of already gone.
Well, right. That was on January 26th. He contacted Penn State 2 days after the national championship, like 4 days before that. So like Ohio State knows he's talking to Penn State. Why would they invite a guy who's in active negotiations to leave the university to come to the celebration? Like and a guy who's kind of doing it behind their backs.
It's a 4D chess move to make him look worse when he doesn't show up.
Well, right. Yes, that would. Yeah, we invited it and show. No, I think he would have gone, but like, to me, again, this is just weird drama that doesn't need to exist, and that really, ultimately, none of this matters. But the fact that this article exists at all is actually what's most interesting to me. Because why does Penn State? Why is Jim Knowles? Why is James Franklin? Why are they even doing this? Who cares?
Ryan Day has moved on.
Yeah.
I think it's obvious. Well, James Franklin is trying to fight his own fans again, and so they need to create a distraction to draw attention away from that fact. And so hey, can you disperse some additional drama that'll take the heat off of
let's have a 3,000 word article about something that is completely inconsequential
from SEC apologist Heather Dinich.
Right. Yeah, right. No, it is super weird, and I just don't understand why this is the offseason narrative that Penn State is choosing to kind of engage with and continue, because ostensibly Penn State's considered to be the most loaded team in the Big Ten, right? They have all the expectations. They brought in this incredible defensive coordinator, and I'm not taking away anything from his coaching capabilities. The guy's really good at his job. They have all, James Franklin needs to prove that he can actually win big games, right? Which is not something he's ever been able to do. And so you're starting your offseason with this petty crap about a guy who wanted to leave his job for more money and did. And that's really like the beginning and end of that story. So it's really weird to me that that's, that's what they're going with, instead of like, hey, look at all these guys we have back, and hey, this is like, this is the team to watch out for. They should be promoting themselves, and instead they're doing this reflexive like, we're we didn't do anything wrong, guys, we're fine. Like, I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense to me.
I will say I am somebody that loves a good little bit of pettiness.
Sure, yeah.
But there is a time to apply it, and it is typically, I mean, if you props to you if you lead with the pettiness and then you execute upon that pettiness, because then you get to gloat twice as hard.
That's fair.
But typically the better way to do it is to handle your business first and then be petty afterwards.
Yeah.
The best example I can think of that relative to last season is how Will Howard and Ohio State responded to Indiana after the comments from Kurt Signetti.
Yes, correct. Yeah,
they weren't stomping out cigarettes after right. Howard, converted that 3rd and 35 and then that 4th and 12 or whatever, because they still had to go put points on.
And hey, board. You know what? And this is how you know Signetti's a G and James Franklin is not, because Signetti was like, fair play, guys.
Yeah,
he was like
100%.
He was like, that's right, good job.
Yes,
like,
if that had been Penn State, James Franklin would have tried to fight Will Howard.
He would have lost his mind. Yes, absolutely. So no, I'm with you on that, man. 100%.
But I'm telling you, man, there's already more juice for this Penn State game than I mean, they've played some high profile matchups in, several recent seasons. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that there's been this much already, like the storylines that are going to be going into that game already, which I believe is the first game in November.
Yeah.
I think it's so. Later in the season than it usually is.
Right.
Or that it has been in the past. But regardless of what the record of those teams are going into that, it's going to be the most compelling matchup between those teams from a drama perspective that I can remember in quite some time.
Yeah.
Because there is genuine bad blood on both sides here because of this Knowles thing. Yeah. And I'm glad that the response from Day was to not give a comment, because I'm sure that they, based on how this team has reacted in similarly petty situations after the fact before, whether it's we're going to hang 100 on you,
right,
Zoom conference call, or we're going to stomp out a cigarette after we beat you 38-16 or what have you. I'm sure that they feel some type of way about this situation that they could voice to the media, that instead of doing that, they're saying, we've already moved on, and we would rather focus on the people that are still here and create the best environment we can to go be successful when the teams finally meet. Right. So, but at the same time, the fact that Knowles is willing to already be that forthcoming about the details of the situation so soon after it happened this early in the offseason, it reflects that it's not a no hard feeling situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This is a hard feeling situation.
Well,
and I don't think it's fair to say not a rivalry anymore. This is as much of a rivalry that there's been in the not a rivalry in quite some time, and I'm looking forward to see how it plays out.
It's the most a rivalry can be when one team almost never beats the other team. Like that's pretty much what it is. And in Penn State, like, you get some really good games, right? I mean, they're very close, and they've become these epic, comebacks and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say, and we'll see what the atmosphere is like. It's at Ohio State, obviously, next season, so that'll be a big part of it.
I'm grateful for that.
By the way, if there's a fan base that could have told you this is how the Jim Knowles departure went down, that would be Oklahoma State. I think I think those Cowboys would have been pretty forthright about their feelings on Jim Knowles, and kind of probably always expected that that's how that guy was going to be piecing out, because that's just who he is, man. He likes the drama. So we'll see. I do think, as the offseason goes on, the narratives that kind of develop between Ohio State and Penn State and sort of the top dogs of the conference are going to be really interesting. Again, because Penn State is this is supposed to be their season, right? Like it's all that pressure is on James Franklin. And as you mentioned, if some of his behavior in the spring game is any indication, it seems like it's getting to him like already, like 4 months in advance, which is not a great look, but we'll see how it
at
goes.
the same time, the only thing they were missing is a receiver, and they got the best one in the portal.
They got not only did they brought in like 3 dudes, like 3 other guys. They completely revamped their wide receiver room because they had nobody. So
they're going to be very good. So
yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
I know there have been some top ranked matchups between these two teams in recent seasons, and I still think, regardless of what the ranking is, that this is going to be the most emotionally charged game between these two in a while.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, this is probably going to be a matchup of top 5 teams by the time.
Yeah, I would imagine
this is the most complete Penn State team, frankly, in recent memory. And unless Drew Aller pees down his own leg, I would expect them to be undefeated by the time they face Ohio
But what
State.
if he does? And that's the thing. As a certified Drew Aller hater, I would put even odds on that happening.
You have to be able to complete a pass to a wide receiver if you want to be a competitive college football team.
Correct.
And it remains to be seen based on the most recent Penn State football performance.
Yeah, if he's able to do that. Another thing we kind of alluded to this at the beginning, and it's news that came out as we would have published last week. But Sherrone Moore is going to get a preemptive 2-game suspension from Michigan, but one that they get to pick and choose whenever, right? We're not going to let him, play against like the likes of, Elon State or something like that. Not Elon Musk, but like,
I could tell you wanted to say that.
Yeah, they're the little sisters of the poor. Those are the teams that will not be facing Sherrone Moore. Oklahoma, though, they get the full Sherrone experience. So, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they got to punish him, but they can't punish him too bad because they didn't do anything wrong.
Well, like I said, it's got to be an a la carte kind of situation. You can't just say, well, this punishment is going to hurt. It's got to be this punishment is going to exist so that we don't get punished further.
My favorite part of the punishment that they've levied is that they said that he'll be getting a letter of admonishment.
That's right. Yeah.
What does that do for anybody? Why even include that in the list of ways that you're punishing?
It's actually funny because that's the punishment for whatever intern has to write it, and and then the intern for Sherrone Moore who has to read it. So it's basically like 2 interns punishing each other, and the people who are actually involved, it's not impacting their lives whatsoever.
I can't even believe that they bothered including that.
It's really
the release.
I mean, it's all face saving, and in the light of the NCAA, they've talked about how I think in June there's like the big hearing coming up where they're going to be talking about it and whatnot. I have consistently been of the
glued
mind
to my TV. I can't wait.
It'll be pretty wild no matter what happens. I will also say though that I have been of the opinion pretty consistently that I don't think much of anything is going to happen to Michigan as a result of this. I again would love to be wrong. If they get some kind of significant penalty, they are not able to participate in postseason play, etc. That would be cool. I don't think any of that's going to happen.
I'm tempering expectations, but at the same time, I'm maintaining the stance that it is not merely rivals of Michigan that want to see them punished for this. I think the common college football fan wants to see some sort of tangible punishment for what is effectively verified cheating and disregarding of the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just don't get the feeling that, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, maybe some Notre Dame fan, well, Notre Dame wouldn't count because they're definitely counted as a rival. But let's say a Texas fan who's listening to this goes, yeah, I really care about Michigan, stealing these signs and whatnot. I just don't see an LSU fan, a Florida fan. I don't see these guys going like, oh, this is awful. They got to get nailed for it. I think they would find it very funny if they got nailed for it. I think that would be an amusing part
I
of the overall story.
I think LSU is a bad example because I think the common SEC fan would want to see a Big Ten school humiliated.
Oh, sure, yeah, in general, yeah. But I just think this specific instance of rule breaking, I don't know that it really moves the needle compared to any other instance of rule breaking for most people. Not that it's not significant, but just that I think people are past it. I mean, the meat of this happened literally, like this all came out like literally a year and a half ago. So, in the span of people's memories, and I've said this before, I think that's an eternity. I just think most people will move past it. And the other thing is Michigan won a national championship.
I think slapping statute of limitations on anything, frankly, is a very dangerous, slippery slope.
Well, I'm not saying in terms of punishment they should do that. I'm just saying in terms of the average fan's attention span. Like, I think there is a statute of limitations on the attention span. I don't, there's a lot of stuff that's happened in college football that I've completely forgotten about and never was outraged. Like, let me ask you this. Have there ever been any non-Big Ten cheating type scandals or like rivalry cheating type scandals that you personally were like angry enough about to remember a year and a half later? Because there might have been. I don't know. I just can't. That's where I'm basing this on because I cannot. I'm
sure there's been. I just can't. There's nothing. It's a tough question to answer off rip because honestly, I try not to worry about what's going on. Much as Ryan Day is not worried about what's going on with Jim Knowles at Penn State. I am primarily focused on the program that I support.
But that's my point.
To the dirty laundry of others,
and that's exactly
that are not
my point,
Michigan.
Though. Yeah, but that's exactly my point because if I found out that
is, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, if I found out that I guess USC is not a good example anymore. But let's say like if Florida had some cheating scandal, and then I would forget about it. Like the UNC cheating scandal, where they basically had players not going to class and all that stuff. That's a pretty significant cheating scandal, and they got a slap on the wrist for it. I don't care. I mean, I care in the general sense that it was a dumb thing and a bad thing that they did. But as a fan of college football, I'm not going like, I can't believe they got away with it. How can
you said that was at USC?
UNC, North Carolina.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say, I remember North Carolina had a similar issue.
UNC. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I know about it, but I don't viscerally give a crap. Like, it's not something that bothers me, and it's not something I think about. So I think that's where most college football fans are.
I do think that it kind of depends on like when the scandal comes out relative to when it actually occurred. I think in that case, I think Julius Peppers was on the Packers at that point, like in the twilight of his NFL career when it came out that all that stuff about him and his classes and whatnot being effectively fabricated. It's right. I think it's a little. I think that it depends on how close it. I think that the national interest in the Michigan thing, if it didn't come out if nobody knew who Connor Stalions was until 10 years after the fact, we'd probably be throwing a fit as Ohio State fans. But I think the common college football fan wouldn't care as much.
Yeah,
I will say, like, I generally just want to see bad behavior punished.
Sure.
Like this isn't a great example because this is the team that I grew up with in a local proximity to. But when all the stuff with Shrekgate and Pat Fitzgerald was coming out, I was like, I want to see that program punished for what is pretty. I mean, this isn't just like locker room stuff. This is it
was pretty obsessive. It was pretty oppressive hazing. I mean, it was
crazy, the stuff that was being alleged in that suit, and it was bad enough that they tried to do a very similar little slap on the wrist punishment at first to Pat Fitzgerald before the full details of the scandal actually broke, to what Michigan is doing for Sherrone Moore. Then the full details emerged to light. Suddenly it became a national interest story, and they were left with no other recourse than to get rid of Fitzgerald. And I thought that was much more appropriate than what they were initially trying to do in terms of bury the story and say, let's move on. It's very similar to what's going on with Michigan in terms of how the school is policing itself.
Yeah, no, I'm
not saying the scandals are similar. It's two very different kinds of unethical behavior.
Mhm.
And obviously what happened in Northwestern from a moral standpoint is worse than cheating at football. But in terms of the schools policing themselves to try to bury the story, I do think that there's something similar there. And and as a college football fan, I do want to see that kind of bad behavior and the attempt to put it under the rug get punished.
Mhm.
So I want to believe that the common college football fan feels the same way. But yeah, I think it's harder to care about stuff further out that's happening at other programs than what is happening in or close to your backyard. But I also think that speaks to the fact that so many other schools beyond the Big Ten have strong opinions about wanting to see Michigan punished. It speaks to the relevance of this story in the consciousness of the sport.
Sure. And to your point, I mean, one thing that I would say where I would agree with you is that Michigan isn't North Carolina, right? When it comes to football, right? That this is a program that has more meaning for the fabric of college football. They just won a national championship. That kind of stuff means more at that kind of program than it does at UNC. So I do understand it from that perspective too. I think it's a bigger story because of it.
The Big Ten, it just means more.
That's right. Exactly. So that'll be interesting to see what happens when they have that hearing and all that kind of, we'll probably have a lot of information about the direction the NCAA is going in terms of punishment.
We ain't taking a week off when that news.
No,
drops,
hell no,
I'll tell you
that'll
now.
be pretty wild. A couple other things here. Well, one other thing before we get to Ask Us Anything. Ross Bjork he did a little chat with us at 11 Warriors. He talked a little bit about the game day atmosphere. And so a lot of it was influenced by the game script. And what we mean by that is like the lighting, the technology that's being used, etc. For the game day experience during the college football playoff. He talked about how that was a big influence on them kind of reevaluating what they do. I've also read in various places that when they took a visit to Oregon, that also was kind of an eye opener in the middle of the season about, what improvements Ohio State can do for the game day atmosphere. The thing is, though, and in this article, that we have, he talked. So Dan wrote this, and he talked to 11 Warriors. A lot of it is focused on like technology, lighting, music, etc. All those things that you experience once you've sat down in your seat. My problem has been and continues to be everything that happens prior to that. Okay. Yeah. I don't think there's a big issue. I don't think most fans have a big issue with all the stuff that happens once they sit down in that seat, right? The team is really good. Script Ohio still rules. The stadium actually atmosphere, I think, is fine. It's gotten
one
worse.
Of the only problems when I was there was the Wi-Fi, and apparently in recent years they've
Wi-Fi works great.
They've dramatically upgraded it.
Yeah. So the Wi-Fi works great. Everything that happens once you sit down in your seat, I don't think people take much issue with. The real problem is everything that happens in the 20 to 30 minutes before you sit in your seat. There is no when you go to these big historical stadiums that have a lot of culture and history behind them, I've been to Fenway Park, for example, right in Boston. They have a whole neighborhood set up basically to get you amped to go into Fenway, right? There's stores, there's bars, there's all kinds of stuff that lead you into, and you have that on High Street a little bit. But once you cross, on Lane and High, once you cross Lane and you have to kind of go through this, this desert of parking spaces, right? To get in the stadium. And once you're in the stadium, you have this barren, flat concourse straight out of Soviet, like some Soviet planned industrial city from 1938. It is just barren. There's no decoration. There's soulless architecture. It's soulless. There's one toilet for every 10,000 people.
So that was the one thing that I was going to ask about is that when I was
there's still portalets, dude, and they have to be
is South Stand still just an armada of porta potties?
It is.
There's no actual line. It's just a mass of people waiting for the next one to pop up, and then if you happen to be standing in front of it. You just kind of like bolt your way in.
Right.
There's no rhyme or reason to go into the I remember thinking like, I will never ever go to the bathroom in the stadium because it is just too much of a chore, and you never know how long it's going to last.
Yeah, it's just this
brutalist
going to last industrial architecture inside that you just
So upgrading the experience if you're a student at Ohio State football games starts with putting an actual bathroom in the
that's priority one, putting in more bathrooms. But really, it's not like he talks about how, okay, we need to, we want to make every game like the college football playoff game against Tennessee. You don't need to do that.
That's kind of difficult to do when you're playing, in-state opponents,
correct,
none of which has beaten you in over 100 years.
Exactly. That is exactly my point. If you want to increase the attraction of the game day experience, you don't focus on what happens when you sit down, unless your team sucks, which Ohio State obviously does not. You focus on everything leading up to it. You want to create an atmosphere that gets people more and more excited as they get closer to that entrance. And that's not what Ohio State has.
I can appreciate what Bjork is trying to do, but it is an unrealistic goal to try to strive for that. Yeah. And I also, frankly, I can understand why some people might be, enchanted by shiny lights and all that. And that's then, the strobe stuff that's schools like Alabama do, and that Oregon, I guess, was doing for the Ohio State game last year, and show light shows and sequences that other stadiums have started to gradually integrate. I'm glad that Ohio State has kind of shied away from that experience.
Sure, yeah.
And I also am a little bit surprised that that's become more widely adapted in college football, strictly from the perspective of, I would think that there's some sort of liability for epileptics and epilepsy.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of thought that other stadiums hadn't really been adapting that up until recently, was you don't want to be doing these dramatic strobe lights in the stadium. And I would think that the players, and I would think that the players would find it a little bit distracting on the field too, if you're like in the huddle and the lights are turning on and off, and then it's, I guess it affects both teams, but at the same time, it just seems like more of an annoyance than something that improves the quality of the game.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I don't know.
If they want to improve the experience, what they should try to do is improve the acoustics in Ohio Stadium.
Yeah, and you can do that in a number of ways. I think people need to kind of think outside the box a little bit when it comes to the. It's funny, in the article he also talks about the shot, and he says we can't really.
Speaking of trying to improve the game day experience.
Yeah. He says you can't really downsize the shot, but how do we make it a tighter feel? Well, you can't. That's a great point. You cannot downsize the shot. It was poorly made in the first place. But if you feel that you're stuck with it, then I don't know what you do about it, because that is a building tailor made to do nothing well. And that's the problem. And it has, like, you can have a great basketball team. And, I was a student, at the height of the Thad Body years, right? Well, maybe not. When they went to the national championship, I would say that's the height, but during the Conley days and all that, a lot of people were attending the games. They were selling out, but that did nothing to change the fact that is this cavernous, huge building, not really designed for basketball. And even when it was sold out and people were going wild for the team, it's not a traditional basketball place. And that's the problem. So, when he asks, like, is it lighting? Is it seating sections? How do we get students more involved? I don't know that's going to change the fundamentals of what the building actually is.
We already tried stealing Duke's student section stylizing.
That's right.
Hasn't quite,
hasn't quite paid off.
We're not quite at the Cameron Crazies level yet.
It'll help if you actually get into, the NCAA tournament, but that's neither here nor there. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works. To me, it starts with thinking a little bit bigger than, what kind of lighting can we do differently? I don't think that's going to change anything.
I would agree.
All right, so that's the first part of here. We're going to do Ask Us Anything. But before we do that, we want to remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the dry goods store at 11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all kinds of great stuff. Check it out. The Ask Us Anything this week. We've got a few here. We're gonna answer your questions. Remember, you can send them to dubcast@11warriors.com. A couple here from our good friend Alvin. One is a deep thinker. Let's start with this. Who is the most influential person in your life? And by the way, we're recording this on Mother's Day. So, hey, shout out to all the moms out there, including my mom, who I know is listening / watching. That's not why I'm going to say she's one of the most influential people in my life. That is, in fact, I would say, I mean, your family in general is always going to be some of the most influential people in your life. Obviously, my mom is gigantic, and the influence of me as a human being. I would say my grandmother, super influential to me as a person, in so many ways. She was one of the best people I've ever known or met. And then of course my wife. I mean, I think so, when we talk about moms and Mother's Day, honestly, those are the three that really pop into my head. They're all huge parts of how they, shape me as a human being. I hope that reflects well on them, right? So like, I hope that's something. I hope my actions can reflect well on them, because they've all had an enormous impact on me. So,
I would say Kanye West would be the.
Please,
no, just kidding.
For the love of God, no. Oh my God.
That might have been my answer in college, over 10 years ago, but the landscape has shifted a little bit since then.
Yes. Somewhat. Oh,
I think your parents, your upbringing, it's that inspires the classic question, nature versus nurture.
Of course.
I think that by default, that is probably the most accurate answer. So yeah, I would say my mother and my father. If I had to pick somebody outside of outside of my family, if you really made me think about it, I've spoken about my foray into putting out analysis for the UFC in recent years. And one of the things that kind of really captured me as becoming a big fan was looking into the stories of so many of these people that compete in a sport that really they don't get their share of the financials that the UFC makes, or really anywhere in MMA that they frankly deserve. I mean, your heart has really got to be in this if you're going to go down this route and try to go as far as you can. And there's no guarantees. And I admire so much the sacrifice that they put in for a path where one mistake that couldn't, or one fault that might not even be something that they did themselves, can completely derail the pursuit of the top level. And there's one, a lot of these fighters that compete in the UFC have had a great influence on me in terms of my own ability to resolve through difficult times. But there's the one story in particular that really sits with me and has stuck with me a lot is, I don't know if you know who Charles Oliveira is.
The name sounds familiar.
He was the UFC champion. He's probably going to fight for a title in about a month and a half due to some recent things that have happened. But he was the champion, right? He won the belt a few weeks after I started working for 11 Warriors in 2021. And he, I talk about how important my parents are to me. I come from a very fortunate background, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I've been able to have. And I've been able to have those because of the work that my parents have put into their own lives in many respects. Charles Oliveira was born to illiterate parents in the favelas of Brazil. And for that guy he has more finishes in the UFC than any other fighter in the history of the promotion. In that respect, he's one of the best mixed martial artists ever.
Yeah.
And for that guy to become that from that kind of beginning and to become a champion under those circumstances, you realize how much we are capable of overcoming as human beings when you hear stories like that.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of stories and those people have had a great influence on my own ability to dig deep through difficult times in my own life. When I know that what I am feeling down about going through is not even close to what other people have experienced and had to overcome to become successful.
Right.
It humbles me, and it fills me with resolve to face the obstacles in my own life and to overcome those to achieve what I want. So that's who I would say is probably most influential on me outside of my parents.
Cool. No, I think that's a great answer. In that vein, I'm going to add Helen Keller. How about that? No, I think that's a
good one.
No, I mean, she was unbelievable. By the way, this is from our good friend Alvin as well. Not quite as serious, but I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's something that might happen to one of us in the near future. Who knows? How many Johnny Ginters and George Eisners are needed to take down a gorilla? What is the strategy?
Oh wow, this is so funny because we were actually discussing this prior to not us specifically, but we were discussing this prior to or after the last episode that we did.
Yeah. Well, we said could 100 human beings take down a gorilla? I was watching a video of a gorilla fight a few days ago, like between gorillas, and I was like, damn, 100 humans, they probably can take this guy down, but I don't know. I think it'll be a close thing.
Here's the thing. I think even if it's 100 me's, I think at least 20
the first 30 are
dead. Are getting destroyed.
Yeah, just like torn limb from limb.
It's just a matter of how quickly are they going to get tired.
Yeah, right.
But I think if there's a strategy in place,
the strategy is 1942 Soviet Union versus Germany. I'm throwing like waves of humans at the gorilla.
That's one way that you could approach it, is war of attrition style.
Yeah.
That's one way to get the gorilla tired. Eventually the gorilla gets tired enough that you start
poke it inside.
Well, you got to gouge the eyes, and you got to soccer kick them in the head a lot.
Right, right.
And that eventually is, I think, what's going to do them in. I feel like people don't really realize how much 100 people is until you get 100 people in a space.
That's true. Yeah, it's a lot.
I'm 31. I'm in fairly decent shape. I would say I'm stronger than the average person my age.
Okay.
I feel like 100 of me could probably get it done. Are there people more equipped to do the job that I would rather have 100 of to do 100? Without question. But I think reasonably 100 of me could probably get the job done.
I think 100.
I wouldn't be surprised if we lose, though.
I think 100 of you could get the job done. I would go. I'm 40. I'm probably average. I'm in probably somewhat better shape than most people my age. But I'm also 40. So that doesn't really mean that much. And also I don't know, man. I'm kind of a coward at heart. Let's be honest. I'm not going to be running in there gung ho unless
I've heard this point made a lot in terms of okay, the gorilla's going to decapitate the first two people, and then the rest of the group is going to be so disheartened that they're not even going to fight back.
It's going to be rough.
I think that if you're in if it's a life or death situation, regardless, you have nothing to lose. You have to kind of embrace that reality.
All of this is to say,
being a coward gets you nothing. You're going to die painfully anyway.
That's true.
If you don't do anything, you have to at least try.
All I'm saying is I'm giving myself a 50-person buffer. I'll say 150 of me can take down a gorilla with certainty. I will give myself another 50 people. And again, we're going to the human, just the human waves situation where I'm just going to hopefully overwhelm the gorilla and kick it in its tiny little balls and hopefully eventually take it down.
A low T gorilla. You think 150 Ginters can take a low T gorilla?
No, gorillas have comparatively. Anyway, I'm not getting into this. The Dubcast probably doesn't need to know anatomic specificities of male gorillas.
This is finally going to get 11 Warriors demonetized.
That's right.
Gorilla
so anyway,
discussion.
Yeah, good questions from our good friend Alvin. All right. Well, that is Ask Us Anything. A reminder that you can ask us literally anything by sending us questions to dubcast@11warriors.com. Couple things that I want to finish up with. First of all, APR scores. I don't know how much they actually matter at all. My inclination is not a lot. But
when Michigan regurgitates the online classes criticism at Ohio State,
because it's so easy. It's so easy for Ohio State players to graduate and retain and blah 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 because we're such a stupid diploma mill moronic dumbass school that anybody
we're funneling every student through beer and wine online and rocks with jocks.
That's right, exactly. So, but Ohio State got an APR score of 1,000, the only Division I football program to do so.
Yeah.
That's I find that good. I think that's good. It's something to crow about, something to talk about. And you know what? It's been pretty consistent. Starting with Jim Tressel, like this is a team that has, at least on paper and honestly, I think anecdotally, taken academics pretty seriously. Like I've heard a lot of stuff. Now, granted, there's always going to be people who blow stuff off, but I have just as many stories about players who have worked hard in class, done group projects, all that kind of stuff, as I do players who just kind of slept through things. So I think, honestly, if you look at it, in sum, I think Ohio State is taking it. Ohio State football players are taking their college experience about as seriously as any other group of college students.
We've come a long way from we ain't come to play school.
Which is funny because Cardinal Jones is a smart dude and was a pretty good student. He was just pissed off because he did poorly on a quiz or something like that. But that is still one of the greatest college football quotes of all time. Because then he also followed it with, in all caps, classes are pointless.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that quote.
That's the part that everybody leaves out.
I know, which is the funniest part.
That quote up. Yeah.
So anyway, congrats to Ohio State football on that. That's awesome. A couple other things. Big Ten revenue is like $928 million. Now, granted, you added a bunch
$928 million.
You added a bunch of schools, so that helps, but that's almost $1 billion in revenue.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it tells you a little bit about where the football is in general, just college sports and athletics, at least in the Big Ten. Last thing though, you sent me this earlier last week, which is Big Ten fan survey. I have no idea how many fans actually participate in the survey. I'm guessing like 8.
A statistically significant sample
sure.
of Big Ten football.
Ranking head football coaches by wrestling ability. Couple things. First of all, Luke Fickell's 5, so that means this whole list is stupid. Luke Fickell 3-time Ohio State champion and wrestling, undefeated for 3 years in a row. He would probably win.
He has to be number 1, and that's not us just being homers.
Right,
that's...
But Brett Bielema as number 1 is...
I can appreciate where that comes from.
I can too, because I feel like that dude would literally and figuratively throw his weight around, and I would not want to fight.
I think in the sober rankings, Fickell would be number 1.
Yes.
In the after a couple of beers rankings, there's like Brett Bielema, and then there's a power gap between the rest of the Big Ten and
agreed. Lincoln Riley, though, also very funny that he's 18th.
I mean, that's obvious. Like, come on.
No, but it's like Kirk Cignetti.
That guy's getting used as a toothpick by half of this list. Let's be honest.
That's true, but I just can't see like Kirk Ferentz, for example, like taking out anybody. That's not.
He's got the old man strength.
I don't believe that. I don't believe.
No.
No, I don't see that out of Kirk Ferentz. By the way,
what do you consider more ridiculous here? That Sherrone Moore was number 2 or that Kurt Signetti was number 11?
Kirk Signetti should definitely be higher. He's got that dog in him.
He's
Sherrone
got
Moore,
edge.
yeah, Sherrone Moore, I don't think is terrible. I mean, he was a football player. What wasn't he, like an offensive lineman? Like, I'm okay
at
with
Oklahoma.
That. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think he would be a tough out. Greg Schiano being above Luke Fickell is really funny.
It is. I think Schiano's a top 5 candidate.
Yeah, but just because he's like
above
evil.
Fickell.
PJ Fleck, by the way, if you're running where Ryan Day is, he's square at number 9 right there in the middle of the conference. Fine, whatever. I don't think Ryan Day is. I think he's more of a lover.
I think Day should be lower. He's too nice.
Yeah, I don't see him going after anybody. PJ Fleck is the kind of guy who would definitely fight dirty. He's right above Ryan Day. I can see that. James Franklin, I would put much lower. I don't like, he's at 13. I would put him like right above Lincoln Riley, honestly. Like, I don't see that guy. I don't think he's got it in him. Dan Lanning, another former offensive lineman. I get it. He's at 6. So it's interesting. Brett Bielema, again, just by dent of physical size, probably got number 1 there. But I think the real answer here is Luke Fickell.
It's got to be Fickell.
It's got to be Fick. Also, like, low key, one of the most intense people I think on this list too. A lot of people don't understand like how like crazy locked in Fickell can get, but he would take out. I mean, he's a tough, scary dude. So yeah, interesting list. I appreciate you sharing that with me. I would love to see a 18-person cage match happen between all of these men because it would be very funny to me. I would enjoy that.
Big Ten Royal Rumble.
Yeah, no, that'd be sick. I mean, I don't know who would play like the Mick Foley role here. Maybe like, I don't know, Mike Loxley. I have no idea. I don't know who the wild card is on this.
Good God Almighty, that's Jim Harbaugh's music.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Urban Meyer shows up with a metal folding chair and like smacks, James Franklin in the head and flips off Tony Petiti and then runs back into the behind there. Man, Monday Night Raw used to be cool, man.
It's still real to me,
damn it. God, one of the best viral videos of all time. So anyway, that's what's going on in the off season right now. And hey, what else is going on is the 11 Dubcast will be back next week. It talked about all the fun and frivolity associated with college sports, Ohio State and otherwise. But until then, first of all, happy Mother's Day. Also, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.